The 1770s, James Cook's third expedition. His mission was to explore and chart new lands in the far south. Instead, he ran into impassable barriers of ice. Massive frozen walls blocked his path, making any further exploration almost impossible. Some of Cook's contemporaries believed he had stumbled upon a barrier at the very edge of a flat Earth, a wall protecting the oceans from spilling into space. Believe it or not, 300 years later, some people still buy into this idea. But you know what? This frozen continent is so strange that even the flat Earth theory doesn't sound like the wildest thing about it. What kind of monster did explorers find in a deep Antarctic lake? Is it true that real rivers of blood flow beneath the ice? And where does that glacier-sized hole as big as Iceland actually lead? Seriously though, why is Antarctica so much stranger than you think? Even the discovery of this continent was unbelievably strange. Personally, I've always wondered, why did it take humanity so long to learn about Antarctica? The concept of a mysterious Terra Australis, the southern land, dates back to ancient times. The Greeks and Romans believed there had to be a massive landmass in the southern hemisphere to balance out the known lands of the north. That's why Terra Australis was often drawn as a giant continent on medieval maps. People imagined it as home to exotic animals and mysterious civilizations, even though no one had ever seen it. Ironically, the myth of Terra Australis inspired many maritime expeditions to this region. In the 17th century, Dutch explorers sailed in search of the legendary continent and found it. Well, sort of. They were actually the first Europeans to stumble upon Australia, which they named New Holland. Some cartographers mistakenly thought this was Terra Australis and began calling it Australia. It wasn't until January 28, 1820, that a Russian expedition led by Fade Bellingshausen and Mikhail Lazarev first spotted the shores of the southern continent. I know what you're thinking. Didn't Cook sail there 50 years earlier? Well, since Cook only saw ice and not the actual land, his discovery didn't officially count. In 1824, the British officially renamed New Holland to Australia, leaving the icy southern continent nameless. Proposals for its name included Ultima, meaning the last land, or Antipodia, the land opposite. It wasn't until the 1890s that a scientist, George Bartholomew, suggested adding the prefix "and" to the word Arctic to highlight its opposition to the north. So, if the Dutch had discovered the real Antarctica first, it might have been called Australia, while modern-day Australia would probably still be New Holland. For most people today, Antarctica remains just as mysterious as it was 200 years ago. There are no permanent residents here, but around 4,500 people work at various stations during the summer and over 1,000 in the winter. Mainly, they're scientists. And that's the population for an area of 14 million square kilometers. That's almost the size of the United States and Canada combined. Even if some country wanted to establish a city in Antarctica, it would be impossible. That's because the International Antarctic Treaty, signed back in 1959, declared the continent a place for scientific research only, banning colonization entirely. Thanks to this treaty, conspiracy theories about an ice wall at the edge of the world still thrive. You can't just sail off and check it for yourself if Antarctica is real. Alright, let's pretend for a moment that it's true. The Earth is flat, and there really is an ice wall at its edge. But here's the problem: cosmic radiation. It's so intense that the surface of this wall would instantly disintegrate into gas, and our flat Earth would be flying through space like a comet, leaving a trail behind it. We'd notice that vaporization on the horizon in no time. But the most crucial part is that within a few million years, we'd have no oceans left. Why? because the ice wall would keep regenerating by consuming the water, and eventually all that water would leak into space. I suggest you share this thought experiment with flat Earth enthusiasts and watch their reactions. But seriously, Antarctica is extreme enough without these wild theories. So extreme that even for well-prepared individuals, surviving here is a monumental challenge. The distance from Antarctica to the nearest city, Puerto Williams, located on Navarino Island in Chile, is roughly 1,000 kilometers, and it's not just water separating them, but one of the harshest stretches of sea on the planet, the Drake Passage. It lies between Cape Horn and the Antarctic Peninsula. This is a true nightmare for sailors and researchers. Here, the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans collide, creating one of the most powerful currents on Earth. Roughly 135 million cubic meters of water flow through this passage every second. For comparison, that's almost 600 times more than the Amazon River. Now, add storms to the mix. The weather here changes in an instant. One moment, it's calm, and the next, you're facing massive waves rising up to 15 meters high, crashing with unstoppable force. And even if modern ship captains are unsure they can cross this stretch, imagine sailors centuries ago navigating it on wooden sailboats. But when you finally reach Antarctica's shores, you'll be greeted by winds blowing at speeds of up to 150 kilometers per hour, and temperatures dropping below 70 degrees Celsius. Because the ice sheet is over 3 kilometers thick, the air is incredibly thin, making it hard to breathe. These are conditions almost identical to those near the summit of Everest, and just like Everest, Antarctica has claimed many lives. 1910, a British explorer, Robert Scott, set out on his second attempt to reach the South Pole. His main goal was to plant the British flag there while studying Antarctica along the way. By January 1912, a team of 5 explorers finally reached their destination, but disappointment awaited them. A Norwegian explorer, Roald Amundsen, and his team had beaten them to it by 34 days. Scott and his team weren't the first. They were second. But sadly, that wasn't their greatest loss. On their way back, the scientists were exhausted from hunger and cold, and fierce, icy winds had hastened frostbite on their hands, feet, and faces. They never made it back to their base on the coast. A rescue party eventually discovered Robert Scott and his team's remains at their expedition's base camp. Alongside the bodies of the deceased scientists, they discovered remarkable plant fossils that Scott and his team had carried with them to the very end, and despite their fatal exhaustion. Those were fossilized remains of Glossopteris, a type of plant that existed about 250 million years ago. This discovery became key evidence that Antarctica was once part of Pangaea, the supercontinent that existed during the Paleozoic and Mesozoic eras. Glossopteris thrived in warm, humid conditions, which means the icy continent once had a much milder climate. Fueled by the promise of discoveries and fame, scientists continued launching expeditions to Antarctica, even after Scott's tragic death. By 1914, another explorer, Ernest Shackleton, set off on the Imperial Transantarctic Expedition. His goal was incredibly ambitious: to be the first to cross Antarctica from coast to coast. A team of 28 set sail aboard the Endurance toward the Weddell Sea coast. But by January 1915, the ship became trapped in the ice. After 10 months stuck in the frozen landscape, the Endurance was crushed and destroyed. Shackleton's crew survived on the ice shelf, relying on seal and penguin meat to stay alive. It wasn't until April 1916 that Shackleton and 5 of his crew members built a lifeboat and embarked on a daring journey to South Georgia Island. They traveled an astonishing 1,300 kilometers across the open ocean. Reaching the island, Shackleton managed to organize a rescue for his entire crew. It was nothing short of a miracle. Every member of the expedition survived months in the heart of a frozen desert. To survive there, you need more than physical strength. The psychological toll of isolation, cramped conditions, and near total darkness during the winter months can lead to depression and anxiety. The graves of explorers and frozen remains scattered across the continent are haunting reminders of how unforgiving this icy wilderness is. And yet, it hasn't stopped scientists from continuing to study it. For over 200 years, Antarctica has been shrouded in myths and conspiracy theories that even the biggest skeptics can't ignore. Ever heard of Operation High Jump? Its story goes like this. In 1946, right after the end of the Second World War, the United States sent an expedition to the icy continent, led by Admiral Richard Byrd. On paper, it was supposed to be a mission to study the ice sheet, test equipment, and train soldiers to endure extreme conditions. Sounds pretty standard, doesn't it? But this operation involved almost 5,000 military personnel, 13 ships, 1 submarine, and 33 aircraft. Who sends such a fleet just for research? Admiral Byrd himself added fuel to the fire of conspiracy theories when he returned.
Our very distinguished guest for this evening is Admiral Richard E. Byrd.
In an interview with Chilean journalists, he claimed America needed to prepare for a war against an enemy capable of attacking from the poles at incredible speeds. I checked. He really said that. And that's how the conspiracy theory began. Operation High Jump wasn't just about research, but aimed to locate and destroy secret Nazi bases in Antarctica. Supposedly, after losing the Second World War, the Nazis fled to Antarctica, built underground cities, and have been waiting for their moment to strike again. It sounds completely out there, but it's worth noting that in 1938, Germany indeed organized an expedition to Antarctica under the codename New Swabia. The Nazis' goal was to find a location for a whaling base because Germany was critically short on whale oil. Back then, whale oil was used to make butter, fuel, lubricants for machinery, and even soap. For the Nazi regime preparing for a major war, this resource was invaluable. So the German expedition focused on exploring options for whale oil production and mapping the area. But all they left behind were a few German flags dropped from planes to mark territory. There's no evidence that the Nazis built anything in Antarctica. However, the story of the New Swabia expedition overlapped with the disappearance of several high-ranking officials from the Third Reich after Germany's defeat. It was later revealed that many of them fled to Argentina and Brazil. But in the late 1940s, when the achievements of German scientists were shrouded in secrecy, the idea of Nazis escaping to Antarctica didn't seem so far-fetched. Maybe that's why Admiral Byrd took it so seriously. Still, if there are no Nazi bases in Antarctica, what about the ruins of ancient civilizations? One popular theory suggests that this is where the legendary Atlantis might be. You've probably seen those 16th century maps that supposedly show Antarctica without ice, just as regular land. But historians have proven they're actually distorted depictions of South America's coastline. And here's the thing, Antarctica's ice sheet isn't just old, it's one of the oldest on Earth. We know for sure it's about 34 million years old. Moreover, all modern research using satellites and radar, which can peer beneath the ice, has found no evidence of any structures that could be linked to ancient cultures. Yeah, I'd love for pyramids in Antarctica to be real too, but it's absolutely clear they're just mountain peaks carved by icy winds. The best conditions for life here existed 90 million years ago, back in the time of dinosaurs. That was long before even the most primitive human civilizations appeared on Earth, let alone advanced ones. So, the reality is this. Under Antarctica's ice, you won't find Atlantis or anything else. But then, where does this enormous hole lead? And how did it get there? In the 1970s, in the Weddell Sea, scientists discovered a massive ice-free zone in the middle of Antarctica's frozen expanse, a polynya. In 2017, scientists recorded another polynya, this time a truly enormous one, the size of Iceland. Its area spanned over 80,000 square kilometers, a gaping hole in the ice, right in the most mysterious continent on Earth. Could it be the entrance to the hollow Earth? Fans of this theory believe there's an entire world inside our planet filled with bizarre creatures, advanced technologies, or even whole civilizations. Basically, something out of the latest Godzilla and King Kong movies. Don't get me wrong, I love sci-fi too, but in reality, a polynya forms because of natural oceanic processes. Underwater currents carry warm water to the surface, preventing the ice from freezing. This creates the hole with the ocean underneath, not some secret underground realm. As for the hollow Earth theory, detailed models of our planet's structure based on seismic studies have ruled it out long ago. The inner parts of our planet are undoubtedly filled with scorching rock and a molten metal core. Honestly, I can't even understand why people make up this kind of nonsense, when the real discoveries in Antarctica are far more fascinating than conspiracy theories. Picture this. You're standing in the middle of a snowy white glacier, and in front of you is a waterfall pouring what looks like blood. This eerie phenomenon was first spotted in 1911 during the exploration of Taylor Glacier in Antarctica's dry valleys. Back then, the blood-red waterfall seemed so mysterious and terrifying that it was considered a mystical event. But it turns out that this crimson flow doesn't contain blood at all. Its true source lies in an underground lake hidden beneath thick layers of ice. This lake has been isolated from the outside world for over 2 million years. It has almost no oxygen, yet it contains a high concentration of iron. So when water from this lake seeps to the surface and meets the oxygen in the atmosphere, the iron oxidizes. Basically, it rusts. And voila, red water that looks like blood. In fact, it's surprising that the whole of Antarctica isn't covered in rusty streams, considering it has over 400 lakes hidden beneath its icy surface. These lakes don't freeze, even though they lie several kilometers below the glacier. One of the most famous of them is Lake Vostok. It's located at a depth of about 4,000 meters beneath the ice. This unique water reservoir has been cut off from the surface for over 15 million years. It exists in complete darkness under immense pressure with minimal oxygen. In 2016, a sensational story emerged about the supposed discovery of a giant octopus with tentacles several dozen meters long in Lake Vostok. Russian scientists reportedly named this creature Organism 46B, but no photos or video evidence of this entity was ever provided. Rumors claimed it was taken to a secret laboratory, and no one ever heard of it again. Sounds like just another myth about Antarctica, doesn't it? And for good reason. Because this entire story was the invention of a journalist, Viktor Nikolaev, from the Russian tabloid Komsomolskaya Pravda. While no giant octopus or terrifying creatures have been found in Lake Vostok, life definitely exists there, at least on a microbial level. This discovery is no hoax. Beneath Antarctica's ice, microorganisms thrive, and DNA analysis suggests that some of them have very little in common with life as we know it on the surface. However, studying these organisms is incredibly difficult because scientists can't drill directly into the lake without risking contamination of this pristine ecosystem. So, for now, researchers can only analyze ice samples located just above the lake. could there even be fish down there? We still don't know for sure. And here's where things get even more intriguing. Recent satellite studies revealed a vast interconnected system of lakes beneath Antarctica's ice, with water circulating between them. This opens up the possibility of collecting samples from shallower depths with minimal contamination risk. But those same satellite scans also uncovered something else, a gravitational anomaly. It's located near Wilkes Land in the southwestern part of the continent. The gravitational field here is slightly higher than the surrounding areas, as if something massive is buried beneath the ice. But what could it be? Some scientists speculate it might be an asteroid, or rather, the colossal impact it left behind. Geophysical surveys later revealed traces of an ancient impact crater approximately 500 kilometers across. If true, this would make it one of the largest craters on Earth. Its age is estimated at around 250 million years. However, a more plausible theory suggests that this anomaly is caused by dense volcanic rock left over from a period of intense volcanic activity in Antarctica's distant past. One thing's for sure, studying this continent could teach us so much about Earth's history. It's literally frozen in time there. And beyond the past, Antarctica holds incredible resources for the future, vast reserves of minerals, and most importantly, massive stores of fresh water that could be a lifeline during a global water crisis. But the most fascinating part is that Antarctica is actually helping us prepare for space exploration. NASA's long used this icy continent as a testing ground for its technologies and equipment. After all, conditions in Antarctica are strikingly similar to what we'd face on the icy moons of gas giants. The European Space Agency even built a station there, Concordia, often nicknamed the Earthly Mars. Scientists at Concordia conduct experiments in physiology and psychology to understand how crews on future missions to the Red Planet might cope with isolation, extreme conditions, and limited resources. Finally, Antarctica's thick ice sheets serve as natural detectors for neutrinos, particles born in stars and during the universe's most energetic events like supernova explosions. A special setup called ANITA detects the faint electromagnetic signals created when neutrinos occasionally interact with hundreds of meters of ice. These particles are almost impossible to catch any other way. And here's the kicker. Several experiments have already detected significant discrepancies with theoretical predictions. I guess I'll dive deeper into this in another video. But if these findings hold up, Antarctica might help us uncover entirely new physics. Not bad for a 200-year history of exploration, don't you think?